our president and leader of this group for many years. He died probably about 8-10 years ago. But we have been doing, since that time, we have been selecting a club member who kind of embodied the kind of a spirit that we're looking for in a club, between outreach and everything. And it's kind of embarrassing, but last year, for whatever reason, we lost a template for it, and things got kind of backburnered. But we now have it put together, and the winner of for last year is going to get that award tonight. So the Ray Koenig Award winner for last year is Rhett.
Oh, wow, look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Hold it, hold it.
Yeah, let's see it. Oh,
That's great.
As all of you know, Brett
Thank
is
you.
the brains. Him and Mike put together the Bayfield Star Party idea, and has been obviously a huge impact on our club since he.
And registration is open for the fall.
Thanks again. Brett.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Our second half of the program is almost exclusively on Rudy and the museum. So I'm not sure how you fellows want to handle it, but did you want to speak first, or Rudy, or?
I'm going to introduce the...
Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind.
So the area of astronomy, has many different aspects to it. And one of them is telescope.
microphone, some people have.
Forget the mic. You can hear me.
No, there's some
Well, you
people that
can't.
hard to
Where's the
hear.
mic? Okay, you can hear me now?
What? Closer.
All right, there we go. So the area of astronomy has many different aspects to it. Okay, one of them is telescope building. And what maybe you guys don't realize is that Canadians have done an incredible job of telescope building over the years. I've been to Stellafane now 2 times, and each time when Alan and I go down there, Canadians take a large number of those telescope making prizes. It's amazing. We call it the Canadian invasion, is what we've been calling it. So there is no way up until now for us to celebrate Canadian telescope builders, and I'm really, really pleased that Rudy has stepped up and done something really incredible. So in the 150 years of RASC, they've just now received the largest donation. RASC has received the largest donation in their history to create something really, really special, a museum for Canadians. So I'd like to introduce Rudy Dorner for talk a little bit about this incredible venture.
I don't need no freaking microphone.
I'll put it here just in case.
Thank you. If you can't hear me, put your hand up. That's what I thought. My name is Rudolf Dorner, and I am an amateur astronomer, and I cannot be cured. I'm going to take 5 minutes of your time to talk about the new telescope museum of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, what it is and what it does. When I was a youngster in Kitchener in the 1960s, the night sky was still black. On my 11th birthday, I got a 60mm department store refractor on a wobbly mount. One night, I aimed at a dim yellow star, and there in the eyepiece was Saturn with its rings. I was so excited, I ran around this in a circle, okay? And I was hooked for life on astronomy and on optics. To me, it is magic, absolute magic, that we have instruments, and I'm going to quote, for seeing things far away as if they were nearby. Now that's a direct quote from Hans Lippershey in his patent application for the first telescope. It's also magic that a telescope will show us things we can't possibly see with our naked eye. We all use telescopes, and we sometimes forget, without telescopes, without their magic, our universe would still consist of some fuzzy objects, 6 naked eye planets, and the visible stars. So that brings me to the reason for the museum. Its purpose is simple. It's to document, to preserve, to display, and to celebrate the people and the telescopes which show us our universe. It's incredible to me that the RASC made it 150 years and don't have any organized way of collecting their archives and their history. How old do you have to be? To do this, I've charged the administration of the RASC with the task of tell the story of both the people and their instruments. You've heard of build it and they will come. Well, our mantra will be tell a good story and they will come to your museum. To support this, I've donated $25,000 this year. And by the way, these are my favorite dollars. And I'll donate $25,000 next year and the year after that and the year after that until I die. When that happens and I go to my proper reward in heaven, the RASC will receive a legacy donation of $1.5 million to support the museum and to tell that story for a very long time.
Grandpa, what about me?
You're 6th in line. Especially, I think it's important, as Peter alluded, to tell the story of Canadian telescope builders. If you read Sky and Telescope Astronomy, you wouldn't know Canadians exist. I've met a number of Canadian telescope builders, and I know that their contributions are woefully unrecognized. Let me give you a few names. Stargazer Steve, Alan Ward, Norman Fulham, Peter Ceravolo. I would also add David Levy and Terence Dickinson, and even though they were not strictly telescope builders, they have influenced optics and made outsized contributions to amateur astronomy. You will get your moment in the sun. So let me tell you some specifics about the museum, what it is and what it does. The museum will be built in the next location as part of the RASC headquarters. And it will be in its own dedicated space. The museum will be, I'm going to say, half the size of this room. Now that's not huge. But while the space is not huge, it will be an artifact-rich museum. It will be jammed with lots and lots of things to see and lots of things to do. This museum will be hands-on. We have already purchased a working model of Newton's first telescope. It's going to go on the floor for everyone to use who walks in. And yes, it will get decollimated, and yes, it will be broken, or it may even get stolen. I don't care, we'll buy another one. And then we'll buy a third. But we will make it possible to touch and use the things that are magic. If you take pictures of the planets, like I cut this out of Sky and Telescope, and you put them on the far wall, and you look through Newton's telescope, you get a very fair representation of what he saw 400 years ago. And that's magic across 400 years. And we should also celebrate a guy called Hans Lippershey, the spectacle maker, who was the first to build usable telescopes. And in his honor, we should set out lenses, raw lenses, and then let the general public try them. I mean, who gets to use raw lenses anymore? And then you could look through it and see things that are far away as if they were nearby, and I could confirm that Peter looks no better close up. The museum, I made this a condition, will always be free to both the RASC members and the general public. We sometimes forget, not everybody can afford the entrance fee, even if it's a small one, especially if you have a family and a bunch of kids. The museum will also be open Saturdays when the general public is available to go and visit. The museum will provide a reason for members of the RASC to actually visit headquarters. I've been a member of the RASC for 40 years. I never found a reason to go to headquarters. The museum will have a website that's easy to navigate and will display every story, every item distinctly. I've looked at a half a dozen museum sites. They aren't that good. So I suggest that we use a template from a commercial enterprise. Auction houses. They do a terrific job. They have figured it out. In the auction house template, each item is cataloged individually, has a half dozen high-res pictures, has a very clear explanation, and the easiest search engine in the world to use. So that should be our template. Let's not build it ourselves. Finally, the museum will have a renowned archivist, a real professional, Mr. Randall Rosenfeld, who will guide its creation and growth. And so there will be academic rigor along with interesting displays. Now, it's my task and my great privilege to give this museum a strong push, both conceptually and financially. But after that, it belongs to the RASC and to you. And I hope you will support it, both in word and in deed. It's going to be up to you to make known the historic stories that are waiting to be told about the museum, the RASC, the telescope builders, and amateur astronomy in general in Canada. It's going to be up to you to point out where the historic telescopes and other artifacts are waiting patiently in some attic to be rescued, and to be displayed, and finally to be appreciated and preserved for the next generation, the generation after that. So the success or the failure of the museum will depend on the RASC and people like yourselves. If you support it, it's my hope that it will become a very fine museum, a small one, perhaps even a small world-class museum. And certainly I hope it will become a must-see destination for every amateur astronomer in North America. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say.
Oh, it's big closer.
Switch. Switch.
That's good. This is a presentation I did about 3 years ago, a very short 5-minute presentation on the history of a telescope that was discovered, built in 1903. I'm just going to cheat a little bit, but I'll use it from two sources. The one on the right is the Scientific American, the same magazine that we know today, and it's from January 24th, 1903. There was further information given that I happened to find in a New York City, in a New York newspaper, in an edition published in March 8th. Essentially what it's telling is the story of, in 1903, Jesuits in Montreal were building a 20-inch telescope. What happened though is, when I tried to find out what they did after it was complete, is I came up blank. It was built in Montreal, so I looked at places like McGill and some of the French language universities in Quebec to see what was done with it, but it just disappeared. And I kind of just shrugged my shoulders, and away it went for a couple of years, until I emailed a couple of people. I believe Mike, Peter, Alan Ward were in it, and maybe Daryl. It was a few years ago. And the only reason I sent it was out of interest. I said there's amateurs building telescopes in Canada 120 years ago. And
one of the replies I got was something along the line as well, that sounds like the 20-inch Vatican telescope for a mirror. And Alan Ward read it and went, holy smokes, this might be it. And my reply was, what the hell are you talking about? In Sudbury, this is written in 2008, there's a story of the headline was Mysteries Abound at Astronomy Club. And you see these two gentlemen here, that's Alan Ward and the president of the club named Robert Pothier, I don't know how to pronounce it. They have a 20-inch mirror that they called the Vatican. They don't know where it came from, but it's in their possession. So it got nicknamed the Vatican telescope. Why? Because apparently one of the people that owned it at one time worked there. And there's a long story about tracing its history in the Sudbury paper. Now, going back to this picture, this is from Scientific America. I'm blowing up the photograph. And fortunately, Scientific America had excellent photographs and was well scanned. And we see somebody polishing the mirror. Now, he's working on the mirror. You can see these notches here. Where's the light? In the side of the mirror that help identify it. And it's a 20-inch mirror he's working on.
Can you go back to that?
Yeah.
You gotta show the cell.
Yeah, I'm going to do that too. And on the wall is a cell. You can see it hang. It's just on the ledge. Is the cell that holds the mirror. Now, this is a 20-inch mirror in Alan's shop. So we learned at the same time that the telescope that I didn't know, the telescope that I knew existed but didn't know where it was, is the that Alan Ward had, but he didn't know where the telescope was. So we've known each other fairly well for many years at this point, and in a small circle, we had pieces of evidence of the Thames telescope, but didn't know it. So there's the close-up here, and the next page I show the picture again for the purpose of what Peter was demonstrating. The mirror itself, for whatever reason, is on the wall. In 1903, you can see the skyline of Montreal in the background. And there's the cell that Alan Ward has. So it's absolutely the same one. Now, on the cell, we start to get into the Vatican stuff. On the cell is this etched plate that says Speculum Justitia or something. That's Latin for mirror of justice. And the inscribed thing here is the stylized M for the Virgin Mary. So it also would give clues to its Vatican heritage. What happened was the guy that built it, what I think happened, in 1903 they built it, there was problems with it. It was very heavy and the mount was too small, so it is my guess that when they wanted to use it, they found that it wasn't going to work, so they stripped it. Why they built it, whether it was used for students at the college or perhaps common hunting or for public, who knows, but it disappeared. Although this doesn't exist, they're showing the tubes. What they did was they made a frame and they glued paper on paper on paper. And so part of the problem was the tube alone is made of glued paper, weighed about 250 pounds, which is enormously heavy. However, if you're familiar with John Dobson's, the Dobsonian telescope, what did he use? Sonotube. So years later, when you made Dobsonians, you were using sonotube, which is basically rolled paper or cardboard. So that they're onto something there. So it's clear that it got shelved. And in the 1950s, they were building Laurentian University in Sudbury. And they decided at some point that they were going to build an observatory. And one of the gentlemen was named Leclerc, was going to build a telescope for the observatory, and he used the 20-inch through his connections. Probably he was a Jesuit as well, a priest. So he somehow took the Montreal glass and took it to Sudbury with the purpose of building a new telescope and a new observatory. But there was a problem. They built it based on the specs, the blueprints, on a 20-foot dome. But in actuality, it was only 16 feet. So when the telescope was completed, they had to revise it, which primarily meant that counterweights now had to be closer and therefore heavier. And so once again, the design didn't work. A few years later, they bought a new telescope for that observatory in Sudbury, and once again shelved the 20-inch glass and kept the mirror cell. Now, I wrote about this 4 years ago or so. This is the copy of the journal. It's from August 2016. The cover shows just probably the visual view of the sun, but it's the transit of Mercury. So if you go to the RAP website, you can download the copy. It's probably free for anyone because it's old now. And you can read the article that I wrote about this telescope in far more detail than I have time for here. The telescope was nearly destroyed this week. With an enormous chip on the backside of the mirror can be seen today on the mirror that Alan has. It indicates that the mirror was dropped at some point in its 110 history. Alan has detected a shock wave in the mirror from the drop. And so how close it was to being destroyed is anyone's guess, and when it happened, no one knows. Much later, and I think some of you are familiar with this, Alan had suffered a fire at his shop, and a large heavy metal component was dropped to the floor at the very spot the mirror had been placed, but it had been moved only a couple of days earlier for some reason. So it could have been destroyed twice. So a quick recap. It was built in 1903 by Father Curelet, and I had to read my article to remember what I wrote, by a guy named Father Curelet at Jesuit College. It then disappears. The mirror cell was brought to Sudbury by Father Roger Leclerc in the late 60s to design a new telescope. Mr. Legault built a telescope in Sudbury for a new observatory, and then, but the specs were wrong. And so presently now, Alan Ward now possesses the mirror cell. Twice the telescope was built 60 years apart around the same mirror and cell. Twice design problems forced its quick demise, and it's a miraculous that the mirror and cell survived. That's it. So I just wanted to read rather than quickly find I had some conclusions. Thank you, Mr. Glass. I'll just read part of my conclusion. And some of it I've already mentioned. But the most reasonable deduction is that shortly after the completion of the Montreal 20-inch telescope, with the obvious design flaws, including monstrous weight and undersized mount, that made the telescope unusable. At some point, the tube mount, etc., were dismantled and either discarded or recycled. The mirror and cell, however, were kept intact and stored somewhere awaiting its resurrection. Miraculously, some 6 decades later, Father Leclerc, doubtless through his connections within the clergy, learned of a 20-inch mirror that was available in Montreal. He transported the mirror and cell to Sudbury and helped design a new telescope around these components. As documented here, the telescope had irresolvable issues, and the mirror and cell were once again put in storage. After another 5 decades or so, the mirror and cell are now in possession of Alan Ward. By today's standards, the mirror is pointlessly heavy. Unless for historical purposes, it would be unsound to build another telescope around it. Given the remarkable journey the mirror has had, including surviving a near fatal drop, a fire, and twice stored for decades at a time, I can't help but wonder what the future holds for Sudbury's Vatican mirror. So that's the recap as far as I can remember it. So, the telescope the glass blank may have come from France by one of the best glassmakers in the world. They said it came from the Mantua factory. And Mantua, the glass for the refractors in your piece, for example. And so it's a wonderful piece of history that no one knows about. Now we do, and I'm sure that there are a few more stories like this in our history in telescope.
Is that going in the museum?
Yes.
Yes.
It seems like a no-brainer.
Yes. Well, that would be, I assume, Alan.
It's been arranged.
Okay. So that's at least one piece of history that we have. Thank you.
Cracker is going to talk to us a little bit about re-silvering the Vatican mirror and some very interesting technique. Okay. Fire away.
So we've passed around the article that Clark was talking about, the Vatican mirror. We can put that on the website, right? Can we not? Okay, we're good. So what I'll do is, the way we've structured this talk is really talk about the museum. Clark talked a little bit about the history of the Vatican mirror. I'm going to talk about what's next and what the heck did we do to it. Okay, so the mirror's history. Alan had that mirror since 2005. He's had it for 14 years. The box is right here, and that is going to the museum as well. It's about almost 4 feet wide and about 3 feet high, and it was made in the early 1900s as well. That's the mirror there. So the box was bulky, the mirror was thick, weighed 100 pounds, and in a telescope, that mirror would probably never cool down. Imagine a 100-pound piece of glass. And the mirror had been drunk. Clark talked about that. So here's a photograph I took of the mirror. There's actually several stress points. And essentially, when Alan first tested the mirror, it was a sphere. So it really never would have worked in a telescope very well. And it's a huge, it's a focal length, I think, is 11 feet long. So it's just an enormous, incredible piece of glass, actually. So the big question, what the heck were we going to do with this 20-inch mirror, 4 inches thick, 100 pounds, and would never cool down? What would you guys do with it?
Put it in an environment where it never has to cool down.
Very good.
Slice it in half and make 2 mirrors.
I did not say that. So that was the big question. What were we going to do with it? Because remember, Alan and I are telescope builders. So the solution, where's the drum roll? Well, honestly, it's too sad. I could not tell you what the ideas were. But that did come across one of our minds. So Clark had survived 3 deaths. Not just 2, 3. So the solution we came up with, and thank goodness for Rudy, he talked to us about the museum, and Alan right away said, I have to put this mirror in the museum. And he talked to, I forgot the gentleman's name from the Sudbury Center who the mirror was actually given to, and he's perfectly fine with that. And we talked to Randall last weekend. He was thrilled to receive it. So this is going to be a spectacular thing. And nobody showed this. This is the logo that, I believe this will be for the museum, the logo for the museum, right? And there's Saturn.
I don't like the name.
It's carved in stone now. So we had an idea. Without telling Rudy, we decided to prepare that mirror for the museum and put it back into its original state and re-silver it. Remember a few months ago I did a talk about silvering? Yep. Well, this will be, we did it. It will be silvered again. It's been done 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, and it's going to be done again. This time I used a new process. I'm going to kind of go through it a little bit today. I know some of you guys have seen it, we talked about it. I'm not going to spend very much time on it. But it's an exciting new process that is going to open the doors to large aperture telescope makers all over the world. It really, I can't stress the importance of how, of the impact this process will have on telescope building globally. And actually, I'll save something for later. So the goal here is that the mirror is going to go in the museum, and we want it to look as good as it did, and we want it to look for many, many years. The process should protect that mirror, I believe, for at least 10 years. And you're silver it again. So going back in time a little bit, we talked about the 24-inch telescope. By the way, will that fit in your porch? Whoever the fellow is.
Yes. Yes, yeah, bring it over.
Bring it over.
Cut the balcony railing out.
So this is the problem. Like, I don't. You guys looked through this telescope. A lot of you guys looked through it last year, and you saw how spectacular it is. There is a demand for large aperture scopes. The problem is the glass is expensive, and the coatings are pretty much just as expensive. So we've addressed the coating issue here. I'll talk a little bit about that. There is another technology that was sorted out over the last few years about slumping mirrors. So you can, and that's, I'll talk about that later on, where you can take thin mirrors that cost very little, like this one here, 3/4 of an inch thick, and put it in a kiln and slump it to shape. So now you can buy glass that's cheap and slump it and silver it for a very economical price. It's very, very exciting stuff that's going on here. So we needed a breakthrough, and there's a number of us that worked on this problem. We decided to go for silvering. It's a chemically applied process. In the olden days, they did it with a chemical dipping process. This one is a spray process, which means you don't have to have a massive amount of chemicals. You can tilt the mirror and you can just spray it, almost like paint, almost like spray paint. It's incredible. Before we discovered the way to protect it, it would last about 6 months. Now the coating you guys looked through last year at Stellafane, or at Bayfield. I looked at it, Al and I looked at it recently, and it still looks good. In fact, I took that telescope to Bayfield this year without recoating it. So I was amazed.
Too bad you couldn't use it.
Yeah, I couldn't use it. So, in talking to some of the professional telescope builders, they were looking for a way to protect silver for many, many, many years. And we finally figured out something. We really needed a breakthrough, and there's 3 of us. One guy from the University of Oklahoma, one guy from Oregon, and myself. We kind of figured this out, and it really is going to make a difference to the telescope builder. So here's the spray process I talked about earlier. It's cheap, it's low cost. The coatings can be done for about $1 a linear foot, or sorry, $1 an inch. So in this case, my 24-inch mirror, roughly $20 or so. And you can coat many, many mirrors. That's why it's so cheap. Works for very large mirrors. This is the company that we buy the chemicals from, Angel Building. And this particular spray is $110 US plus shipping. We discovered add an extra $60 for the stupid duties. And it'll do 260 square feet. So it'll do about 80 24-inch mirrors. For $200, it's amazing. Okay, I'm not going to go through the process. This is the process. I'll publish this. Anybody that wants their mirrors silvered, let me know, because I'm going to have lots of extra chemicals left over. I think Daryl's going to be one of those guys. Okay, I did build a silvering jig. It'll do up to 30 inch. So Eldon's 30-inch telescope. The coating's going on it. We're going to do this re-silver this year. So this is my first sample mirror that we coated. Just a 6-inch by 9-inch piece of glass, and Carol was a witness to how it went.
I didn't know what to do with this.
Well, he saw me take a clear piece of glass and silver it. So this is actually looking at the glass, it's the reflection going up there. This is my 24-inch mirror, the way it turned out. The yellow is just the light in the garage. And of course the funny one, I had extra chemicals, so we silvered the inside of these crown bottles. That's always a good thing. Now, you guys at Bayfield last year, you noticed that I had some bug poop. These bugs were bouncing around on my mirror, and they actually damaged the coating. So I realized that we had to figure out something. So I borrowed technology from this company, back in 2006, the semiconductor industry for cell phones, for computers, for laptops, all that stuff, they needed to get away from lead in solder and go to silver solder, because lead leaches. If you throw electronics into the trash, it rains, the lead goes into the soil, it's bad for everything. What this company did is they developed a product that can spray onto semiconductors, onto the terminations on chips, to keep the silver from tarnishing until they go through the wave soldering process, or the infrared soldering process. So we tested this, it's perfectly clear, it does not alter the figure. It's a nano scale inorganic material. It doesn't change the figure, and it works. And it's cheap. The gallon is about $30 US. And a gallon will do hundreds and hundreds of 24-inch beers. Okay, so we have an important part of Canadian history here. And it's interesting because we wanted to coat this mirror, and I realized that as we're doing it, we are creating our own history. We're actually altering the history of this once great telescope. So we documented the entire process in a set of videos, and I actually put them on YouTube. So maybe what I'll do is, who does the website these days? Carol? I'll give you the link, or I'll give you this presentation and put the link in it. You guys can watch the videos, the whole process. And I'm not going to bore you here, but it's phenomenal. And the mirror, you asked, it is going to Rudy's museum, which is excellent. There's the article. And the next one here is how the mirror turned out. And it turned out beautifully. It was a perfect surface. I threw this in. I wasn't sure if you were going to throw it in, but I did it. It's a beautiful photograph. And here's the day. The same day we silvered that mirror in the original crate, we took it over to Rudy's place, and we almost handed it over to, at least notified you that we're giving this to you. So this is totally a surprise. Okay, so where do we go with this now? In 2019, the convention at Cellophane, which is the premier telescope builders convention in the world, there's going to be two things happening. Alan Ward is going to be doing, we're going to be dragging his 10-inch coating machine down there. He's going to be doing free coatings for people, on-site coatings. We're going to tell them that this is the first time it's ever been done, but it's a lie. Because in 2003, he took that machine to Starfest and he did coatings. We're not going to tell the organizers until after Cellophane is done. And the second thing is I'm going to be doing, spelling mistake. I'm going to be doing a demonstration, a live demonstration of silvering mirrors at this convention. And I think that's going to draw quite a crowd. There's already a Cloudy Nights thread about it going on right now. Okay, and that's pretty much it.
Hey, Peter, I'll wander over.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How do you prevent dust that's in everybody's room from getting onto the mirror when it's still wet?
You're talking about the coating process?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, you know what? I do have a short 5-second clip. Can we show that? Yeah. That's a really good question.
Hopefully.
And that jade is the answer. I did a whole series of experiments to figure out how to silver. And I had a whole series of failures until I realized that the chemicals transition, they react very quickly. And I had to tilt the mirror at a certain angle and get the fluids to flow off the mirror quickly. What that does is if there's any contaminants on there, it washes them off as well. So when it's done, it looks like it came out of a vacuum.
Don't you get the thicker on the box then, or?
No. It's a good question. Silver does not like to stick to most things. Silver does not stick to glass. Okay. Silver does not stick to silver. So the coating is extremely thin and round. What we do is we apply a very thin layer of tin, chemically deposited tin, just at the molecular level, and silver goes right onto that really beautiful. Okay, it's just a small thing.
Is this the full video?
The MOV. The MOV file.
This one.
Yeah, play that.
How do you get the tin on this glass?
Ah, you gotta watch the video. I brought them here, but I showed them at the main meeting last month. They're kind of boring. It's unedited. You can just play that. Can you go to play?
Yeah, so I think it's trying to download the USB.
Oh, okay. Maybe stop playing.
Really?
Yeah,
We're
there we
gonna play 10 of them now.
Oh, here it's coming. No, we had the audio, we didn't have the video. Anyways.
Oh, it started up iTunes.
Yeah. So the answer is that it's just washing anything that's in the air, it just washes it right off.
You do an open with.
Okay.
Right
Any other
click.
question?
Right click on the file and try to do open with video player.
We can try something. Open with movies and TV. Let's try that one.
Oh, there we go. So that's, this is just a 5-second video showing the process. You probably play this a
Oh,
couple times.
I don't know if we
And,
can. Too big or?
Sorry?
Too big or?
Okay, so there's two chemicals. There's the silver solution and the silver reducer. And you have to spray them in air so they hit, when they hit the surface, they convert. And it creates just a gorgeous surface. Well, really soft.
What do you go until you see it's covered completely?
Yeah. When we, that's tough, I might put a light behind it, but it's, you can't really overdo it. It doesn't, it just flows right on. That's just a short little video, just to show how it goes on.
For going to the GA, she covered off pretty much everything I didn't do, and we still haven't got together and brainstormed everything. I will be sending out a report to cover all of that, answer a lot of questions. We came up with a lot of ideas. One thing is, when we're going down in the car, she was talking about smooching with people, and what she really meant was schmoozing with people. So
Thanks a lot.
we overcame her Dutch inability right there. And we were either attending a lecture or networking, and we did a lot of that. It took me a day and a half to sleep it off when I got home, and you guys will benefit from it. We came up with a lot of good ideas, a lot of things that we want to do. One thing is we've got 5 professional speakers coming starting in September and possibly 5 more afterwards, so we don't have any problem with speakers in the next year. Also, if you have speakers in mind, let me know. The first speaker I'd like to use is in line with what Chris Hadfield was doing. Anyway, that's that. I was going to bring up the 101 thing, but what I want to do is just raise a point for discussion, because we've got 3 months to discuss it. 28th of September, I'd like to, which is a Saturday, I'd like to have 101 in here. We will, most of the observers will be off in Bayfield, and that'll leave it clear for us to run a trial program with the general public and putting the media together, so all these things can be discussed. And the last thing, is anybody a friend with Sean Nielsen? That's what I thought.
Steve.
What's that?
Steve's pretty close.
Yeah, he's about my only contact with it. No, it's something to do with LPA that we're working on. That's it, thanks.
I know him.
Jim, over here.
Steve, he's done.